Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm Clément from the Outpace Payment team, and today I'm excited to show you how to integrate our checkout web component using its Brick implementation. For this demo, I've chosen to use Apple Pay as the only payment method. We will cover everything from setting up your project to making a successful payment. Before we start, let me quickly remind you what our Brick Mode integration is all about. If you're already familiar with it, feel free to skip ahead to the next session. Our Checkout SDK provides two options for displaying payment methods. The first one is Block Mode. In this mode, the SDK provides a block to place on your page. And within this block, we handle the placement and display of all available payment methods. The SDK also manages the selection and switching between payment methods. On the other hand, Brick Mode gives you full control over the placement of payment methods. You are responsible for the layout and selection of all available payment methods. It's pretty handy if you want to display several payment methods at the same time. For example, we will assume you already know how to generate a PPID from your server. For this demo, we will build a fake server that returns a static PPID, which you will need to replace with the actual API call in your production environment. In this tutorial, we will focus on displaying a single Apple Pay payment method. But the process is the same for any other payment method you may need. Please note that you won't be able to complete the payment in a local host environment, as you will need to register and verify your domain with Apple to make it work. Let's start from scratch by creating a new Angular application. Since Apple Pay requires a secure environment, we generate a custom certificate to serve our application over HTTPS. In this application, we create a dedicated component for your custom payment form, which is not handled by your SDK. We also set up a component specifically for displaying the Apple Pay payment method. This is where the SDK is implemented, and it's where you should focus your attention. To simulate the server that returns the PPID, we will set up a simple Express server. Here is the code for it. This server listens on the port 8080 and returns a static PPID. In a real-world application, this will be replaced with a dynamic value generated on your server by calling our Checkout API. Now, to make this server accessible from the front end, we will use a proxy to avoid cross-origin issues. Here is what the configuration proxy looks like. With this in place, any request from the front end to /API/PPID will be proxied to localhost/PPID. So, in your front-end code, you simply call the proxy like this. This makes it easy to retrieve the PPID and store it for further use in your application. Once you have your PPID ready, it's time to initialize the SDK. To activate Brick Mode, make sure to pass the option Mob Selection in SDK false. Here's how you configure the SDK. At this point, if you run the application, nothing will be displayed. That's because in Brick Mode, you are responsible for rendering the payment method. To do this, you will need to loop through the available method of payments in the onReady callback and select the one you want to display. In our case, we are focusing on Apple Pay. First, you will create your payment component inside a dedicated container. Since we are using Apple Pay, there won't be much displayed visually. But if you are working with a payment method that requires user inputs, those will be injected into this container automatically. Next, you'll select the payment method you want to use for the transaction. If you have multiple payment methods, you will handle the selection on your side using select mob component. For a police UI, we provide a function to retrieve the official payment method logo. Just call getIconURL to get the SVG URL of the icon. Here's how it all comes together in the onReady callback. In this code, we check if the method of payment is Apple Pay. We create the Apple Pay component inside the container. We select Apple Pay as the payment method using select mob component. We set the official Apple Pay logo using get icon URL, and that's it for setting up Brick Mode. You now have a full control over the layout and interaction of the payment method. Now, all that's left is to link your payment button to the Checkout Pay method and display the Apple Pay logo that we retrieved in the previous steps. Here is the button code. This button uses Apple Pay logo and triggers the payment process when clicked. Next, you just need to implement the Pay with Apple function. When the button is clicked, this function initializes the payment process using checkout.pay. And that's it. With this setup, you can now trigger Apple Pay and process the payment seamlessly. To track the progress of the payments and handle the outcome, don't forget to bind the on-success and on-error callbacks. This way, you will receive feedback on whether the payment was successful or if there were any issues. When a payment succeeds, the on-success callback will log the success details. If something goes wrong, the on-error callback will provide the error information. After receiving a success message from the UI, don't forget to call your backend again. This step triggers a Checkout API call to confirm the payment status on our server and ensure everything is processed correctly. Now it's demo time. An end-to-end demo requires to register a domain to Apple Pay, which we can't activate on localhost. To show you a live demo, I will be using our hosted checkout page since it's already using the Brick Mode and it's properly configured for Apple Pay. Congratulations, you now know how to integrate our SDK using Brick Mode with the Apple Pay payment method. Feel free to adapt this implementation to suit your specific needs. If you have any question or need further assistance, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy coding!